Without further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Devin, and he will give you an introduction and talk about today's session.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Here, let me share my screen so that when we're talking about work life and redesigning work life, I can be transparent about this is where my work life is happening, is in my bedroom here in Exeter, New Hampshire. It's a pleasure to have everybody here. What we'll do is we're going to start the session with a meditation. And so I am not deeply experienced in leading meditations. I've gone through them before. So I'm going to really invite you to partake in this with me. So we're going to spend the next 4 or 5 minutes. First, what I will ask is that for those of you who feel comfortable, if you can try to make yourself as comfortable as possible, and then if you choose to, you can close your eyes. I just want people to imagine that you are on an epic voyage, okay? Whether by land or by sea, I want you to first picture where you are right now. If it's a voyage by sea, picture yourself in a boat. If it is by land, maybe you're on your feet, traversing a hike and trails, or in a vehicle driving the roads. And then I want to invite you to take a slow, deep breath and feel the air gently upon your skin and your hands and your face. Try to smell and capture a scent of your surroundings, opening your ears to the sounds of nature and its forces. As you imagine yourself on this voyage, think about what motivated your voyage. Think about who was with you on that voyage. Think about things that you may have brought with you on their voyage. Now I want you to take another breath. What direction are you headed? And think about why it matters where you're going. And think about who you hope to be when you get to where you're going. So now take one deep breath. And now if your eyes were closed, now open your eyes. And if you are able, I'm sharing my screen, so I'm literally able. I invite you to stand and try to stretch out in all of your directions. take a deep breath again. And in closing, appreciate yourself for taking that voyage for the last few minutes. And now would be a great time for applause. So congratulations to you all. I hope that felt good. Here we go. Now I'm sharing. So I'm Devin. I am a dad and a spouse and citizen of communities, and I'm a runner, which helps to keep me sane these days. I'm Deputy Director of Design Research at SNHU's Innovation Center. So what we'll do is we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to briefly introduce what are we doing for the next 15, 20 minutes. We're going to talk about life design. This is really just an introduction to a concept that is built upon the shoulders of lots of other wonderful people who've been doing this work. So I'm going to do a brief introduction to that. We'll spend some time on a reflective activity, and then I'll preview some things that I might suggest could carry you forward. But first, in terms of setting the table of norms for the next 23 minutes, one is I hope that everyone can reserve the judgment that you may have for yourself in thinking about design and life and work. Just whatever you're worried about judging for yourself, just pause it, and there is no judgment for this time. And the second is to do your best to be present. And if you do lots of mindful moments, I'm sure that people are practiced at doing their best. And as may be example, if one of my kids comes tearing in here, life happens. And then 3, this work is really important to get in touch with your authentic self, which is part of how I constructed the meditation at the beginning. So what is life design? Recently, the authors of the book Designing Your Life, Dave Evans and Bill Burnett, they started a webinar series about designing your life in a COVID time. And they have this quote that new normal is an oxymoron. You take those two words together, new and normal, it doesn't exist. There's nothing new about normal, they say. And this arguably creates an even greater justification for how to think and act and behave in some of the best ways that designers inhabit for our own selves in these times where things can be uncertain. There's no right answers to this, but we're trying to center ourselves in ways about the things that really matter and then design our way forward. So most simply put, life design is a process that's based in something called design thinking. And my own training and the people who kind of taught me and brought me to this work really think about not just design thinking overarchingly, but using a specific process of human-centered design. It's also about a series of mindsets that we use and inhabit about how we approach ourselves and our work and our intentions. And then finally, our application is what do we do next in life when there's no right answer, particularly when life throws you a curveball, and we continue to get thrown many, many curveballs, and that's the most generous version of the things that we are dealing with today. So the easiest way to talk about the process of human-centered design as it applies to life design is in these 3 phases. There's divergence and convergence that happen first at a point of finding inspiration. So when we solve problems, ideally with others, not for others, we try to find inspiration in their work. And if there is, yeah, go ahead. And when you're doing it for yourself, you literally are trying to find inspiration by understanding what matters to you. And then there's a second phase, which is the ideation phase. That is a point where you take that rich understanding and you're trying to come up with ideas, kind of going out from moments of divergence to opportunities of convergence, settling in on ideas that might satisfy needs, and then kind of blowing that out a little bit when you're testing these through prototypes and implementation stage. That often should happen often and rapidly and iteratively as you start to define solutions that would make things better. So if that's the process, here's the book, Designing Your Life. There's actually a new one called Designing Your Work Life that I haven't even read yet, although I've listened to the podcast. So I would encourage you to go to those as foundational texts. And then there's literally more than a decade's worth of both academic research and this more kind of popularized conception. It's work that's come out of Stanford, but also places like Tulane, and now has been taught to more than 100 colleges and universities around the globe. So the activity I want us to engage in is about wayfinding. So wayfinding is like I think a really critical framing mechanism and series of activities that are based in this ancient Polynesian art of finding where you're going when you don't have a clear destination. So here's where I need you to, as best as you can, find something to write with and find some paper. Okay? So if you've got a notebook, if you can go grab some post-it notes, whatever it is, if all you've got is your phone, see if you can open some other app, or maybe you just think about this for yourself. But I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes, and then what I'm going to invite you to do is to write some incomplete responses to the following questions. Okay? So that first question, and I'm going to pose these in the chat as well, but this is really meant to be what will probably be more like 4 minutes now. You're going to have incomplete responses. They'll be random thoughts, but I just want you to use these as prompts, okay? So the first is, why this work? When you think about the work that you are engaged in right now, why do you do it? And particularly, I'm thinking about this work identity of the things that you maybe are paid for, the things that you consider your job or your duty. And if the thing that's most important to you is the role you play in a family, that's great. And if the thing is, for me, the role that I play is Deputy Director of Design Research, that's great. Why this work? The next question is, when are you your best self? When you think about the times that you can bring your most authentic and best representation of yourself and contributions that you make, when is that? What are you doing? The third question is, what do people assume or expect of you that shapes you? And then the fourth question is, what have you been ignoring or not spending time thinking about? So take your paper and your pen, and I've got my trusty little timer right here. And I want you to just try to jot down some responses to those, which are part of shaping your compass and your constellation that you will navigate. I'm going to turn off my screen while that happens. Note that in the 2.5 minutes you have left, if you have any questions or need clarification, go ahead and put that in the chat. Okay, my timer is going to go off right about now. So go ahead and finish your response. Okay. So what you've done is you've taken a first step at designing a compass for yourself and understanding the constellation and navigating by the sea or by land. And in ancient days, you'd be using the stars in the sky to get by, and your compass is your sense of direction, knowing that you may not have a perfect destination in mind right now. And that's part of the voyage. So what we want to do now is I want you to take another minute, okay? And it's more than a minute. It's actually going to be another 4 minutes, maybe less. Now I want you to calibrate your compass. So in the Designing Your Life book, they use the sense of like energy meters or gauges, but they do that on these 4 key criteria, which is love, work, play, and health. Now, we could debate and describe like what do those things mean to you, and I think that I'm just going to ask you to make a really rough estimation right now, about where is love in your life, how is work, how much play, and how is your health, right? Not just your physical but your mental health. And then think of each of these circles. What I would invite you to do is literally draw 4 circles. Okay, L, W, P, H. So think about drawing literally 4 circles, okay? And then I just want you to fill it in. So when I think about the love in my life, how much love is there in my life? Where do I have room to grow? So I think for me, I'm feeling a lot of love in life right now. I'm very fortunate and blessed and spending a lot of time with my family. There's a lot of love. I know that I'm not connecting with everybody, and sometimes that love is tough, particularly with me and my kids. When there's a sense of health, I am feeling that is pretty good in some ways and not good in others. I feel like relative to the world, I have pretty good health, but the part that's not there is the mental health about being home with kids. So what I'm going to do is give you actually 3 minutes to draw those 4 circles, and then what I want you to do is just shade in each of the circles for how full or not is your meter of love, of work, of play, and of health. And when you do those circles and you shade them in, I also want you to just take a moment to note, what do you notice about them? And what's one thing you could do or change, not maybe a rapid change, but a doable change, an achievable change to make life better, okay? So I'm going to give you, I gave you 3 minutes, but I'll probably give you less, okay? So write those circles in, shade them out. If you need, take just a moment to think about, what does love mean in my life? And what do I mean by play with others, for myself? When I think about work, it's the kind of work. What am I doing? How is it going? Ask questions in the chat if you need to, if you need any clarification. Otherwise, the only wrong way to do this is just don't do it. But there's not one right way to do this. So you're just assessing for yourself, especially considering the things you've done in your compass and constellation. Again, as you think about drawing those circles and shading them in for how full you feel in your life right now in each of those dimensions, the things that you notice, maybe just bulleted lists. I'm feeling surprisingly full in that, or empty, or I want to explore this more. And then in the change that you could make to make your life better, this is thinking about concretely what's one actionable change that you could enact in the next 2 weeks. That is maybe a concrete way of thinking about this. So in my mind, what is one thing that I could do to get more sleep consistently? That might just be about charging my phone on a different side of the room so it's not right next to me when I go to bed. Okay, take another 15 seconds on this. Oh, great question by Jody. Is work fullness about satisfaction or quantity? I think satisfaction, and maybe even more than satisfaction, it's like fulfillment. And the subtitle of Designing Your Life is how to live a joyful and well lived life. But there's a part about joy that they ask about there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on just to the close because our time is running short here. So what I've tried to do is arm you with a set of questions to use for reflection, and then a way of thinking about, as I said, developing a compass and a constellation, the compass that you use to set your direction and the constellation that you use to figure out where you are. Your compass is another tool to calibrate. So I want to close by talking briefly that the mindsets of life design, which come from this work of designers and design thinking, are explained in the book Designing Your Life as curiosity. Actually, let me get back in. So curiosity, radical collaboration, reframing problems, process awareness, and bias to action. So really briefly, curiosity is to inhabit a spirit of curiosity about everything, especially when you're figuring out for yourself. That radical collaboration means don't do it alone. Okay, it may be tough to do it with people, and think about the people who are immediately close to you, but that's why they talk about building life design teams. Reframing problems is how can you find other perspectives to look at something. Awareness of the process is using design as a process. And don't forget, those are your guardrails. And the bias to action is when in doubt, do something. Whether that is write a journal and reflection, or come up with a series of ideas, or test it. So this last part that I leave you with is about problem finding. So what does curiosity mean? It means for the thing that you picked, or right now, when you're closing this, pick something in your work, or you could substitute life, but think about something in your work that's impacted by life right now, or vice versa. So 8 weeks ago, my wife and I were saying, how are we going to do this? I got 2 young kids at home. We picked our schedule. How are we going to think about time? Okay, so something actionable was how we would spend our time during the day between work and our kids. And then when you reframe problems, we didn't just say, how are we going to break up the time? We had to think about, well, what matters in that time? What matters to our kids and to us and to work? But I would encourage you to take a piece of paper and fold it up till you get 8 squares, and then in each square, write an idea. Or if you got Post-it notes, come up with at least 8 ideas. At least one of them should be crazy and wild to really stretch your thinking. And think about variables that are at play in addressing that thing at work that you're trying to make better. Whether it's when you do it, where you do it, how you do it, what you do, or with whom. And then the bias to action is from that, try to come up with a guiding question or a hypothesis. And then are there 3 little micro prototypes that you can test to get an answer to that question? So if it's about getting better sleep, maybe it's about the phone and maybe it's not. Okay, so a prototype is moving the phone to a different part of the bedroom. But another prototype may be about drinking water at night. Okay, maybe it's about Maybe it's about I need to go stretch her for a walk. I don't know what that is. And then the last thing I'm going to invite you to do before we close here is if everyone has, I think everyone has the opportunity to chat. So what I'm going to invite everyone to do is, how are you feeling? Type a word in and click enter right now. Great. Yeah, and there is no judgment here. So whatever that word is it's you, and we're owning it right now. So thanks so much for this time. I'll hand this back off to Layla, but if you have questions, you can come find me on email. Social media is a little iffy these days, but I'm probably on Twitter more than anything else, and I have my handle there at dscared if you just kind of want to like connect and kind of be following things along. But I hope that this was helpful. At the end of the day, there's no panaceas, especially in a pandemic. But in a COVID time, I think Life Design has a place to help us out. So I will turn this back over to Layla. Thanks again for your time, everybody.
Thank you so much, Devin. It's always super inspiring to talk to you and to learn from you. And this was super helpful just to kind of recalibrate and to look at life to see where we're at. So thank you again so much. It was just wonderful. It kind of just helps you rebalance. So for everybody, thank you all for joining as well.